Welcome everyone as you join us. I'd love for you to turn your cameras on so we can see your smiling faces today. We want to thank you and welcome you today to, on behalf of the President's Forum on TEI, we want to welcome you to Planning for Growth in 2021, a multidisciplinary approach. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dustin Klein. I am the Chief Content Officer of Smart Business and publisher of Smart Business Magazine. We have a great lineup of experts and advisors today to briefly share their thoughts with you. They span the gamut of industries and disciplines, and by the end of this morning's program, we hope we've been able to provide you with some food for thought for 2021 and how it progresses. Each of our presenters today is going to spend approximately 5 minutes sharing their insight with you. And if we stick to that timeline, we're going to try to save the last 15 minutes or so for today's program to answer your questions and maybe hear a little bit about what you're doing that's been some successes so far this year and how you were planning for the future. We also welcome you to use the chat function, chat box, and drop your questions in there during the course of the conference. We will answer them at the end. But also your thoughts. If something resonates to you with one of our speakers today, we want you to comment on it and drop that right into the chat box so that we've got that there for them. So we are going to get started, and our first presenter is Dave Clifford, President of Advintegrity, who is going to share his thoughts for the next few minutes on recruiting and retaining. Dave, you're up.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. As Dustin said, my name is Dave Clifford. I have an executive search firm and a CEO coaching business called Advintegrity. I also teach at John Carroll University in the entrepreneurship program, and I'm hopefully months away from completing my doctorate in leadership at Creighton University, which is one of our sister schools of John Carroll. To sum it up today, I think the most important part, if we look at the success of so many companies, they use a strategy called a retained executive search. They go out and get the talent that you need to help build your company. And my suggestion to everyone out there is to minimize the amount of advertising that you're doing and figure out a research process, an innovative process to go get the talent that you need to make your company grow. And once you get that talent, I would highly suggest that you retain the talent through something called an employment contract. I had a conversation with one of my CEOs yesterday in my advisory group, and I was very clear with him. I said, what would happen if this guy left the company? And he said, well, it would be devastating. And I said, do you have a non-compete agreement? He said, no. I said, do you have an employment contract with him? He said, no. I said, so why not put that in place for him? And he's like, well, he might buy the business from me someday. I said, well, even more reason to have it in place, because if he buys the business, then you've already got the contract in place to help. But if he doesn't buy it and you decide that your exit strategy is to sell it to a private equity firm or a competitor or something along those lines, then you can use that as an asset to protect him and protect you. So those would be the things I would recommend the most: recruiting, going out, putting together a research process, identifying the players in your industry, and put together a comprehensive plan on how you're going to go out and find the talent. I do this through a strategic planning course that I teach with some other people, and I'll shoot you my contact information if you're interested. But recruiting and retaining is the most important part of any business. If you look at the success of the Cleveland Browns this year, they recruited and retained talent. They went out and got the talent that they needed in key positions, and they put people into those positions. And people want to come to companies that are really doing well. So my son just texted me this morning and said, JJ Watt might be coming to Cleveland. I'm like, wow, that would be fantastic. We never would have gotten a guy like that a couple years ago, right? But today we're able to because we've got a winning team. And it's so important for us to have those things. So I know we're going to have a lot of different things. If you have questions regarding how to put together the research process, feel free to shoot me a message. I'd be happy to help you out in any way that I can. But recruiting and retaining is the most important part. So put together your recruiting plan, put together your retention plan on the key employees, and work with your advisors and your counselors to help you manage that. Okay. That's the quick down and dirty, but we can certainly have some more discussion. We're all capped at 5 minutes, and I have a few challenges that said that I wouldn't be able to do this in 5 minutes. So I'm going to keep it within 5 minutes. Okay, Mr. Flanagan?
Thank you, Dave. Our next presenter is Dominic DiPuccio, Practice Group Chair at Taft. You're up.
Morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody. Those of you that I know, Dominic Tipuccio, I head up the M&A group here at Taft. I do work all across the transactional spectrum from M&A to private equity to venture capital. I work with early stage companies and startups and general business counseling all day long. My takeaways, and I won't use all of my 5 minutes, so Dave, you can have some of my time if you'd like. I have 3 takeaways in terms of how you should be getting your company ready for growth in these times of the pandemic. And they're all very kind of similar and related. One is to catch up with technology. Technology is advancing really, really fast, and it's changing the way people do businesses, and it's changing the way businesses operate. And COVID just accelerated that. So it's time to spend some time and see what others are doing in your space, see what new technology is out there, and test the waters, because there's a lot of really cool ways to improve the way you do business. Technology is changing every day, and you're all hiring younger kids every day, and they're used to this technology. So now's the time. The second thing is the pandemic has given every business, including mine, including our law firm, to be creative and to morph into something new. It's forced us to think out of the box, because something, I always say, you're minding your own business and a piano falls on your head. Well, that's what happened. We were all kind of minding our own business and pianos fell on our heads for business. So now's the time to think about how you're conducting business, what's working, what's not working. The pandemic is showing a lot of weaknesses in everybody's business. Now's the time to spend some internal time redoing your SWOT analyses and trying to really get your arms around your strengths and weaknesses and what you can do better. And lastly, similarly, it's time to reflect. It's time to reflect on what you've learned in your business. What has this situation in the pandemic showed you and told you about your business? What did it teach you? What were you right about? What were you wrong about before the pandemic that you now realize? What did you learn about your customers? What did you learn about your products or your services or the demands for both? And what did you learn about your employees? So I think the key to me is this opportunity. This pandemic is really an opportunity. It's giving us all a chance to sort of reflect internally on the way we do business, because it's changed the way we do business. It's my 2 cents.
Dominic, I think it's worth a lot more than 2 cents. We'll give that one a nickel or a dime. But thank you very much. I appreciate that. Folks, if you've got questions for Dominic, go ahead and drop them into the chat. We will begin to do those at the end of today's program. Next up, Dan Flanagan, Regional Sales Manager of Group Management Services. He's going to talk a little bit about what life's going to look like post-COVID. Dan?
Morning, everybody. Dan Flanagan, Regional Sales Manager, GMS. We're a certified PEO based out of Richfield, Ohio. We're the largest professional employer organization in Ohio and just help small business owners with HR functionality. I'd break really HR into 5 different areas. Reflecting, as Dominic said, creating the time to reflect on what's next. And think about what has already worked, what you've learned throughout, the tumultuous 2020, and what has been missed in the response. Evaluating your business as far as, did you go more remote with your workforce? Are people still in the office? What worked and didn't work there? The second thing would be recommitting, reinforcing commitment to well-being and the purpose through focus on physical, physiological, and financial concerns of your business. I think a lot of this could also go into, looking back and then recommitting to your company goals, your company vision, reevaluating how you retain employees going forward. I think recruiting kind of can play into this, and Dave really hit on this already earlier with recruiting and retention. But a lot of companies are struggling to retain and find talent right now. So do you go to more of a remote type setting where you can get a farther reach outside of this region or in different areas in Ohio? Can you find talent pools outside of Ohio because of the ability to now do things remote? I think the third thing is re-engagement. Redeploy your workforce, maximize the workforce's contribution and overall potential. Reinvest in your people. Like Dave was saying, your people are your number one asset of your organization. Reinvest in them, reinvest in ideas that they bring to the table. Your leaders, those types of things. I would also say rethink. Utilize new business priorities to rethink, reconfigure the workforce, workplace, and balance of ongoing, evolving business needs. What do those look like? Are those personnel things? Are those the restructuring of your core business principles? And then just rebooting, realigning HR and people and operations and priorities with the most pressing concerns first. What's most important to your business? Reevaluating your goals, your vision going forward. The nice part about partnering with GMS and an HR company is we become that lifeline to a lot of the compliance struggles right now for business owners. Unless you're staying up to date on the news and regulations and all the things that are coming our way from an HR standpoint, it's absolutely impossible to stay up to date on, whether or not you're compliant or not. So relying on third-party vendors to handle those things so you can continue to steer the mothership and focus on your goals and, the future of your organization. If I can help, or if anybody at GMS can help with any of these HR things, we're always there for small business owners.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. We're already starting to get some good questions, which we'll hit on. I also encourage you to chime in on the questions, folks, during the conversation and make this an engaging chat. Next up is Kurt Heft, partner and CEO of Easy IT, who's going to talk about KPIs and how to keep your people accountable.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kurt Heft, and I am CEO of Easy IT. We do IT outsourcing and co-sourcing for about 50 companies across 15 states. In that role, I talk to a lot of business managers. I talk to a lot of business owners. And the first thing when COVID hit, and I think this is a great topic, by the way, don't waste a good crises. When COVID hit, the first conversations is how do my folks work remotely? And then we get into how do we secure them remotely and those sort of topics. And I thought about talking about those, but there are some pretty canned solutions for that. Most of us have figured that out by now, keep that in our businesses. But ultimately, we would get to a point in our conversations where we're talking about you need to train your people on security, train them on safety. Security incidents have gone up. And as we're talking through that, I would say you have access through us to a training program, which will show them best practices and test them and that sort of thing. And ultimately I'd be asked, well, how do we know if any of my employees are doing that? I'm like, well, you can go into a dashboard and measure what they've done, what they haven't done, and if they're actually going through the training and if they're learning anything from the training. The interesting part, though, is after that, we would get to a point of, how do you know your employees are doing anything when they're remote? And that's the hard part. And the challenge I think that business owners can take away from this, if they weren't really tracking what their people did when they were sitting in the office with them, they just had anecdotal evidence that they were being productive. You certainly don't have any idea when they're remote if they're being productive. So if you back up and start integrating into your workflows things that can be measured, that show that people are doing stuff, that is something that you can carry forward forever in your business. And I would challenge everyone to think about what those things may be. Collaboration tools have made it a lot easier to do that. We use Teams heavily and Zoom heavily, and those things are great. You can actually get in touch with people, see them, touch them, what are you doing? You can see their work in SharePoint and other places. Leveraging those tools, I think, would be good for businesses, and think about how you can incorporate them in your business processes. And then I guess my other thought would be, as you're thinking through how you can better understand how productive your people are, start tracking their happiness. You can't see them. You're not in the same room with them. When we do that, we all intuit how good our culture is doing, how happy our people are. You can't really do that too well over this sort of medium. I would suggest that maybe some sort of occasional polling of how they're doing, or direct call just to have one-on-ones more often than you do now would be a good thing. But try to measure your folks' happiness and how they're getting along. So that's all I've got.
Excellent. I like the happiness index. I think that's something that as we're reading more or hearing more about mental health issues, as we're all going kind of a little bit bat crazy, that's a great idea, Kurt. Thank you for sharing. Next up, Mark Lapicus, principal at Apple Growth Partners, going to share a little bit of what to expect with tax legislation this year.
Yeah, hi, Dustin. Thanks everyone for coming today. So first off, I wanted to talk about this stimulus bill that was passed in December. I'm sure most of you are aware of this this round 2 of PPP loans. So basically, if you're a business, if you had a reduction of 25% or more in gross receipts in any quarter in 2021 as compared to 2019, you're eligible for the second round of PPP loan, assuming you have under 300 employees. Also, what came out was even if you got a PPP loan, you're now allowed to claim the employer retention tax credit. Before this bill was passed in December, there was a no double dipping rule that applied. Now you're allowed to actually get both of these incentives. So what is the employer retention tax credit? This was part of the package that came out in December, and it basically allows you to claim up to a $7,000 per employee per quarter, up to a $14,000 maximum tax credit on your payroll tax filings. So how do you qualify for this? For 2020, if you had a reduction of 50% or more in sales as compared to any quarter in the previous year, or if your business was shut down due to the state mandate. For 2021, the rules are a little bit more relaxed. So in Q1 and Q2, so Q1 right now, if you had a reduction of 20% or more in gross receipts in this quarter, you can also use your Q4 2020 as compared to 2019 to determine the 20% reduction. You could potentially get the PPP loan round 2 and get this employer retention tax credit. There's a little interplay how the two of these work. You can't use the same expenses. So if you use your expenses to qualify for the forgiveness for the PPP loan, you can't also use your expenses to apply for this ERTC. The good thing is there's time to apply for this employer retention tax credit. It's on you claim it on your payroll tax filings, so you can go back up to 3 years and amend anything that any tax return that gets filed with the IRS. So there's plenty of time to speak with your accountant or speak to someone who knows more about this to see if you could potentially qualify for this employer retention tax credit, as well as the round 2 PPP loan. With the new administration in the White House, there's a high likelihood that we're going to see an increase in taxes here in the next 18 months. So a couple things to be aware of, and this was all part of, during Biden's campaign, there was a lot of talk about increasing capital gain rates, and I've heard a couple different things, through the campaign that, hey, we're only going to increase capital gain rates for people over $1 million or over 400,000 or, whatever it may be. But just be aware that there could be an increase in capital gain rates. What does that mean for your business? Well, if you're looking to sell your business in the next, let's say after legislation changes and there's a increase in the capital gain rates, well, chances are you're probably going to be over one of those thresholds, which means that one of the thresholds that they were, throwing out during the campaign, 400,000 or $1 million in income, which means that instead of paying a 20% tax rate, you could be looking at paying a 37, 39, maybe even some higher tax rate depending on what could happen with tax legislation in the future. So it's just kind of, start thinking now that, if you're looking to sell in the next 18 months, you could have an impact due to potential changes in tax law. The final thing that I wanted to touch on was estate planning. So currently we have a $11.7 million estate and gift tax exemption. This is a lifetime exemption. So for a married couple, it's 23.4 million. A lot of taxpayers are well under these thresholds. Back during the Obama administration, these amounts were, it was 3 million, then it stepped up to 5 million. And we think that there's a high likelihood that we're probably going to revert back to that $5 to $3 million exemption amount. What does that mean for your business? Well, let's say they revert back to $3 million exemption amount. And let's say your business is worth $10 million. So at the time of, date of death, pass away, and you now have your estate was over the $3 million exemption, which means 7 million of your estate is subject to estate tax at a 40% tax rate. So you're looking at $3 million to pay your estate tax at the date of death on a business that was valued at $10 million. So the only way to come up with that money in some cases is to look to sell the business or to have insurance to fund these potential obligations in the future. So it's just, there's also some planning strategies with having a high estate gift exemption right now at 11.7 million. There's a lot of planning that could be done to avoid some of these potential issues in the future. And, this is all speculation, but it was throughout the campaign. These were a lot of talking points that, hey, we're going to reduce the estate gift exemption and we're going to eliminate capital gains. So I would say it's more likely than not to happen here probably in the next 18 to 24 months. And that's it for me. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to discuss.
Fantastic. I see more questions and ideas coming in the chat. Please keep them coming. We'll hit them at the end of this group of presentations. Thank you, Mark. Next up is Rick Phelps, partner at Action Coach, going to talk about alignment. I like that.
Very good. Thank you, Dustin. My name is Rick Phelps, and I am a principal at Action Coach of Greater Cleveland. And we are business and executive coaches. And my topic is alignment. It's two forms of alignment. First, we start with aligning the leadership, or in smaller business cases, the partners. So often we start working with business and the partners aren't aligned. We've had cases where husband and wife partners were misaligned, where one was looking forward to a long time working in the business, another was thinking they were going to retire and travel in a couple of years. That misalignment can cause a lot of problems and heartaches at the business level and at the personal level. So that's the first alignment. Make sure you are aligned as a leadership team and know where you are going and why you are going there. The second alignment is once you're aligned at the top, align all the pieces down through your business from the top floor to the shop floor, and make sure you're aligned on the right outcomes. Think about what are the right outcomes for your customers, for your company, and for your team. And more, team is becoming extremely important. When you do the alignment and you're going from your overall overarching goals of your business down to what people do on the shop floor or in your offices, be aware not all processes are equal, right? Some are more equal than others. And understanding what in your business limits your ability to make money now and in the future is absolutely critical. If you don't take into account, then you will align imperfectly and you will work at cross purposes without realizing it down through your organization. So figure out what limits your ability to make money, what is the operations or the processes or the people that limit you, and then work to bolster their capacity and their capability. And that's really important. And it's important because as the workforce changes generations, and we're having more and more millennials and Generation Z folks join the workforce, I hear a lot of complaints about what the new generations will and won't do. And I'm here to tell you the generations that are coming are demanding things that are the right things for your business. They want to know what their purpose is. Why am I here? Why am I doing this work? What good is this business doing? It's really important to the generations, really important to your business. They want development. They don't want to just work in the same position forever. They want development. They want to develop their skills, right? Don't dwell on their weaknesses. Don't try and fix them. We're humans. None of us are broken. We just have strengths. Let's play to our strengths. And to that end, coach. Don't be the boss, be the coach. Help them develop, help them grow as individuals. As a coach, you want to have ongoing conversations with your crew. Listen first. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them proportionately, right? Listen to what's going on and then have meaningful conversations about their strengths and how they play into the business. Because more than anything in the new generations, work is an absolutely integral and critical part of their life. And so it's a different generation. Listen to them. They have great ideas. Get yourself aligned from top to bottom and have an amazing 2021. And that's my piece.
Great, thank you, Rick. You know, watching some of these chats come back and forth, and there's some great things I think we're going to have a chance to talk about shortly. Next up is Isaiah Stidham, Senior Wealth Manager at Boudreaux, Rulin & Rowe. He's going to talk a little bit about working on your business instead of just in it right now.
Thanks, Dustin. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody, and good morning. Hopefully everyone's still pumping that coffee down. So, yeah, like Dustin said, I think, you know, with the pandemic and what we've gone through over the last 12 months almost now, you know, it's very easy for business owners to, you know, I think just shift into this endurance mode and kind of head down, grind it out, let's get through this thing. And what I've very much encouraged a lot of our clients to do is, you know, we need to continue to work on the business. You know, every business owner will eventually exit, and it'll either be on your terms or not on your terms. And the work that you do today in getting that plan in place is critical. And in maximizing, I think, your value, but also maximizing the satisfactions you have in transitioning the business. I think a lot of these conversations also take a tremendous amount of time. I work with a lot of family-owned businesses, and you layer in that emotional component to these conversations, and there's just a lot to work through. So, you know, a lot of these discussions too, we like to say, you know, the easiest thing to do is just transition the equity and the shares of the company. But really, how are you focusing and developing that next generation of leadership? And how are you transitioning that decision making? And I think these are the times where it's really key to kind of pull those next leaders in your firms up with you and start to continue to develop those. So, you know, my encouragement to all of you and all of my clients and the work that we're doing is, you know, continue to have those conversations. Don't put those things off, and continue to plan. I know a couple of other people have mentioned just, you know, it's part of that is really, really important to develop your team of advisors. So, you know, align yourself with a quality CPA, a law firm. If you are considering a transition, you know, one designation that I have is the Certified Exit Planning Advisor. So find somebody that's in that transition exit planning space and that's an expert there, and really start to put your team together, get your house in order. So that's my encouragement to all of you, and happy to answer any questions on what that could possibly look like.
Thank you, Isaiah. Next up, Andy Vollmer, Managing Director of Bellmark Partners, can talk a little bit about M&A and capital markets.
Thanks, Dustin. Good morning, everybody. As Dustin mentioned, I'm with Bellmark Partners. We're an independent investment banking firm with offices in Cleveland and Boston. This morning, I'm going to just give you an update on what we're seeing in the current M&A and capital markets. There's been a lot going on over the past 10, 11 months. In my world, I give a lot of people M&A advice, timing, even some of the planning things Isaiah was talking about. But every situation with every company is unique and specific. So, it's hard to give broad advice across, to an audience with, involved in leading different companies in different industries. But generally, I can tell you that M&A and capital markets conditions right now are really great. I mean, there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of liquidity, both in the public and private capital markets, and with private equity groups and strategic buyers looking to acquire businesses. In fact, I would say the demand for transactions right now and investments is currently exceeding supply. So I would tell you that if you're satisfied with your business right now, its performance over the last 12 months, your outlook for this year, it's a great time to consider equity capital for growth, or even full sale or exit strategies. They're both wide open. I'd say from a valuation standpoint, valuations are extremely attractive right now. The problem is in my world, I generally tell people, there's really two main factors, right? The market has to be strong, and it has to be the right time for your business. And when both of those are in alignment, it makes great sense to pursue different strategic alternatives. In terms of business conditions right now, it's a mixed bag. Many companies out there, were obviously negatively impacted by COVID, and that hit their financial results in 2020. Some companies actually got a boost from COVID. We'll talk about those, but the vast majority of companies out there have been negatively impacted by the economic shutdown, obviously. And so what we see there's a lot of business owners that were planning an exit last year, would love to exit this year, and they're in a little bit of a waiting mode, waiting for their numbers to improve. Unfortunately, they're not getting a lot of that improvement that they're looking for right now in Q1. Again, broad comment, just because the economy in Q1 of 2020 was very strong. So it's a tough comparison right now, going back to Q1 2020. I think those comparisons, depending on the business, most businesses took a big hit in Q2, specifically April and May. Some companies that, business services, other types of business, more project related, didn't really feel the impact until the third quarter. But in general, I would say that easier year-over-year comparisons will start in the second quarter. And then you'll see, companies trailing 12-month EBITDA performance start to pop. So what we see is a building of M&A volume throughout the first half of the year, really starting now. We're seeing it now a little bit. We expect to see more of it in the second quarter. We also would expect to see a lot of tax-driven M&A volume here in the second half of the year, and people trying to get transactions done prior to the end of the year. With the assumption that the new capital gains rates will become effective January of 22. Again, we'll have to wait and see on that. But we could see the busiest M&A market, I think, that we've seen in the last few years right here in the second half of 2021. I would also say just if your business was lifted by COVID, and there's a lot of industries, e-commerce, sort of active and outdoor consumer products. Certainly a lot of healthcare device and services categories saw, lift in 2020. I think if you had a big bump from that really sort of correlated to COVID, if you're going to raise equity capital for growth, or if you're thinking about a sale, the big challenge is the buyers will be very focused on determining how much of that lift is really temporary COVID bump versus a permanent shift in customer behavior. And so that's the challenge there. A lot of those types of businesses are trying to pursue transactions right now, right? Because they're happy with their performance. Having said that, that's my quick overview. I would tell you that if you're, if you grew through COVID, you held together pretty well, you're satisfied with your numbers and you need growth capital, or if you're looking for, some sort of a full sale or sale of a controlling interest, or, control recap with your transaction, the conditions are great. I mean, I've had literally 35 conversations with private equity groups over the last 5 weeks. And they're all telling me the same thing. There's just not enough actionable opportunities out there right now in the middle market, and they're looking for opportunities. So that's what I have to say this morning.
Thank you, Andy. Living in this space the last several years, I can tell you that you were dead on. It is about as busy as we've ever seen. So thank you for sharing, and we'll take some questions on that after our last presenter. Last but not least, Joseph Sophia, Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending at First Financial Bank. He's going to talk a little bit about planning.
Good morning. I always knew people didn't hold bankers in high esteem, but I think that's reflected in me going last. So I'll be brief. Some of the advisors I had not met prior to this, but what I'm going to focus on, frankly, it's a little bit of what Isaiah focused on. We both have that SEPA is, I'm listening to the IT and to Dave Clifford and research, search, and Dan Flanagan. A lot of times people focus on like lawyers and accountants. You need a lot of advisors. And if you're trying to do something as a business owner, the more advisors you get together and tell them, I mean, if I'm trying to sell my business and I talked to Dave and said, Dave, I want to sell him 36 months. I don't see how that's going to hurt him providing services to me. All it's going to do is enhance it. And then if I tell Kurt at Easy IT the same thing, he might say, well, you have an issue. You might want to do this before you sell. So I want people to kind of take a pause and think about that. Are you really talking to all of your advisors? And we do this in our personal life too. We ask certain people the same question, and then we just follow the advice of the one we want to follow. We don't put everybody in a room, because it's easy to ask my 4-year-old daughter a question versus my wife. So I was asked to focus on 3 things. I'm just going to focus on one because I think it's important, and you've gotten a lot of information. It's to create an exit plan. That's really code for creating business value. My experience, I work at First Financial Bank. I deal with commercial customers. Exit planning, creating business value is analogous for a lot of people with death, or like getting life insurance. It's something we all know we need to do, but we don't want to think about it. So what does exit planning really mean? And let me give you an example. I have a customer, he's in the IT business, the telecom cable space. He's incredibly illiquid. He loves when he makes a bunch of money, and he'll tell me these. I know he's illiquid because I see his statements, but he'll tell me these things. Hey, when I have a big sale, I just go get a Ferrari, and he does. And he came to me and said, gosh, I want to retire. I don't have enough money to sell my business. So that's why exit, he's the case study for why exit planning is important, and he's extreme. So some of you on the phone may not be buying Ferraris, but potentially you haven't thought through the steps. So how do you get there? The step number 1, what do you do right now, is obtain a business valuation. There's all different kinds, and depending on the size of your business, there's ones that are more appropriate, but that's a starting point. So it's very much like getting an appraisal on your house. What's your business worth? And then you can discuss with that evaluation person and your team of advisors that we're going to get into, how do I drive more value? Again, I think Andy Vollmer, who I haven't met before, had some good insight. I mean, that would be somebody that I would talk to and say, this was my valuation. How can I up it? And I guarantee he's got 3 or 4 things you can do. Then the next step is to protect what you've got. That's going back to, maybe it's the IT, maybe it's insurance, maybe it's contracts for employees. I like that Dave said. Maybe it's contracts with customers. Maybe you have a customer concentration. Maybe you should get accounts receivable insurance. And this is a big one. Your family is part of your advisory group. In a lot of cases, I think Isaiah may have touched on this. I can't remember. There's your spouse, but they're your kids too. And even if your kids aren't going to get in the business, how do they feel about you selling the business? Have you talked to them? Maybe they want in. You don't know. And then meet with a financial advisor. So going back to my customer who's illiquid, makes a lot of money, he needs extensive planning. He needs to literally make, in his mind, and I think he's probably right, 500,000 a year. So he has to have a certain number of assets. So he needs to quantify that and work with an advisor to build that up. That needs to happen, or he literally, when Andy comes in and says, hey, I can sell your business for 20 million, he might not have enough money saved up to even execute the sale. So I would split the planning into personal and business. And what I mean by that is there's certain business advisors that can help you and personal advisors. And the biggest thing I would stress is to get everybody in a room and tell them what you're trying to do. And if you can work with the SEPA, that's great. But at least get your advisors working together. Try and avoid the most, and we all do it. I do it all the time, where I ask somebody a question, and then I like 5 different people the same question, and then I just go with the advice I want. And what I would leave you with, and I wish I knew who said it, but it's powerful if you think about it. The biggest issue with communication is the illusion that it's happened.
It's a good thought, Joseph. Thank you for sharing. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you to all of our presenters. We've got about 18 minutes left. I want to open it up for questions from the group and comments and thoughts. We've got a lot of good questions that have come in through the chat. One that's been consistent is really how to engage and hold accountable a distributed workforce. I think that's something we're all facing right now. I'll start with Dan Flanagan. You would share some thoughts on pros and cons. If you could share those real quickly, and then a few people sent me privately a couple case study ideas of how they're doing it. I'd love to get some thoughts on that as well. Then we'll hit some of the tax questions that people had asked. Dan?
Yeah, so I would say that the pros are more, your employees tend to be more productive, and I think that's because they have more flexibility. They're able to work when when they can, or when they're able to work when they want to work. And when I think of COVID in 2020 for myself, I was remote and in the office, and flip-flopped a lot, but I got a lot more work done when I was in the remote setting, because I was doing things at night. I was doing things first thing in the morning. I was doing more things in the lunch time, when you're in the office, there's a lot of distractions, people coming your way, a lot of questions that can take your eye off of what the task is at hand. I think another pro is that it's financially, it's a less cost for the company, and then the schedules are just more flexible. Cons, definitely a con would be managing these people and managing these teams. I have 6 offices that I oversee in Northeast Ohio, Cincinnati, Detroit, Chicago, New Jersey, and both of our teams in Richfield. And it's just hard to interact with all those different people. So what I do is group meetings, and I have them collaborate on projects and ideas and relationships, so that they can work together. And I bring my team and my managers together so that they can intercommunicate and develop and grow, where that wouldn't happen, if it was all in an office setting. As far as engagement, do creative things, virtual happy hours, connecting with team members, doing one-on-ones, catching up on their goals, their metrics. Are they hitting their numbers? If you're within a sales organization, or you're dealing with sales. What else did I write down here? And then just building a remote culture, which is challenging, but it just takes time and effort. And I think it's getting the feedback of your people. We don't survey our staff enough and get the pros and cons from their eyes. We have all these preconceived notions a lot of times that we have all the answers, and really the answers are in our people. So just ask them, what's working, what's not working, what can we do better? all of those things. And then they feel more valued as employees. So I'm done ranting, but that's
Great.
my.
Thank you, Dan. Julie Har, you shared a thought of what your team is doing in terms of connecting with your team. Could you share that with the others? I thought it was a great idea.
So it's actually not our team, it's what we do for our clients.
Yep.
My name is Julie Har. I'm the managing partner of Proforma Strategic Promotions. We are a full service promotional marketing agency that manages an organization's brand on any substrate. And what we've been doing this year, a lot of our competitors shifted to PPE and are selling masks and all sorts of protective things. But we noticed kind of early on that we needed to help our clients engage with their employees as they're not in the office together. So we've been curating drop ships to help employees engage with one another and to help nurture company culture from afar. And I thought I would just share a couple of examples. So one of our biggest accounts is a software distributor, and they have 1,000 employees. Every year they do this very premier event called a Reggae Fest, and they have live entertainment and food, and everybody brings their family. And there's thousands of people there, and how did they were really struggling with how to do this in a virtual environment. And so what we did is we actually, because it's such a premier event, I'm going to share this with you guys. We did these private label, we put the company's name in the tag and the event name in the tag, private label t-shirts that we sent to each individual and their families. So whoever was going to be at that event anyway, we sent t-shirts to everyone. We also included a barbecue set, and the client coordinated food shipments from the Palm restaurants. So everybody got steaks and whatever they would have had at the actual event, and they scheduled the virtual event. They had live entertainment playing through Zoom, and everybody cooked their steaks at home together in their t-shirts. So I love that. And then they had a hashtag that they created for the event, and everybody, imagine thousands of people sharing their images of themselves at home, having a good time, and having that good feeling. So that was one thing. And then we've also done just very traditional drop ships. We had a client do an M&A, and we drop shipped a journal and a mug to everyone as a celebratory gift for the M&A. So there's ways to engage from afar, and I do think it takes a tangible piece to do that.
Thank you. It's certainly something that I'm hearing a lot more about, how people are trying to find ways to connect with their employees. So I appreciate you sharing those examples with us. Kurt, I want to ask you and Dave real quickly to comment on that this from two different angles. One is, making sure that while we're holding people accountable, Kurt, what are some ways to keep people motivated? Just real quickly. And then Dave, I want you to answer the question on people who are looking at a compensation reevaluation during this period of time. I'm interested to know, is it easier or harder to be able to evaluate people's productivity, and when they're coming back and saying, look, I doubled down during this period of time and we really pulled through on a transformation, I'd love to be compensated for it, and how to go about those kind of things. So Kurt, you first.
Sure, how to keep people motivated. I think a lot of this building remote culture takes work. It just takes some effort. We do internally at Easy IT a few things. We have an all hands lunch and learn meeting on Wednesdays. We all get together on a Zoom call. For the people who are actually in the office, we buy them lunch. During those calls, we really try to point out great things that team members have done and celebrate. We have this silly whoop whoop award that we give people where they get a $50 gift certificate and a little plaque for their wall, and we do this silly celebratory thing, but everyone loves it. They eat it up. So we try to do that more than when we were in person in the office. Every Friday we have a virtual happy hour. There's a core group of people that just live for that. Everyone kicks off a little early on Fridays and has a beer and participates. And it usually is supposed to go from 4 to 5, and it usually goes from 4 to 6:30. And those things have been good. But otherwise, to keep people motivated, you got to really stay on top of things that are going right. Here's all the things that are going well for, especially if you're having hard times, and keep people upbeat and talk to them. Take the time to reach out for no good reason and say, hey, just want to see how you're doing. When we did that, we found we had some people that were having real anxiety issues working from home. And we decided those people need to come back to the office because they're single or alone or whatever it may be. They need that social structure, and we're there to support them. Other people seem to be just fine working remotely, and so we keep them remote. So it just takes some work, and it takes a lot of, touching in the ways you can touch.
Thank you. Dave, what about the thought on compensation? It's been a weird year, and I'm sure people are going to be getting that question very shortly.
Yeah, I think, a lot of it comes down to leadership, and it's the leadership from the top down. When you look at all of the things that have happened over the last 12 months, the companies that are doing really, really well are those with great leadership, where they've had to innovate, where they've had to pivot their business, where they've had to do things a little bit differently. I am a firm advocate of incentive compensation. So, as you've got team players that are really doing above and beyond the call of duty, those are the ones that you want to put together a compensation plan where they're incentivized. I talked a little bit about the employment contracts. I think one of the things that this has done is this pandemic has allowed companies to really look and identify who their true A players are, and who their B players are. And then there's the C players. We saw recently in Cleveland a company that I don't think anyone really expected there to be a layoff, because they're in the high tech space, and they've been growing leaps and bounds, but they announced 150 people that were laid off. And it was sad to see, but at the same time, if you had a list of 3,000 employees and you had to lay off 150, chances are you're not laying off your best employees, right? There are ways that you can monitor your employees today. There's things like keystroke. Maybe Kurt can talk a little bit about that, or someone else, where if your employees are actually working on their keyboard. I hate to say it, but it's Big Brother. And you can monitor if people are actually doing things, and people get creative and they have their own little fingers that move things around, or a little device that moves their mouse around, and people get really creative. But if people are doing those, do you want those people on your team? So it kind of gives you a chance to make sure that you, as Rick said, align everything, and it helps you identify the A, B, and C players. And sometimes the best thing that can happen to an employee is when you actually help them go find what they're really passionate about, because they're clearly not passionate about some things in the business. And if there's too many of those, then you've got issues. Many people have probably heard of or read the book or hired a consultant around traction. And there's a people analyzer piece in there. It's a real quick scorecard you can use to make sure that you've got some alignment. And this is one of the things that I really like to do with my clients, to help them make sure that they've got the right leadership in place, and help them understand that, not all employees are going to be leaders. You're going to have leaders and you're going to have followers, but put the compensation in place so that the leaders are properly incentivized and the followers are properly incentivized. Everybody should have a number, whether it be the receptionist who's answering the calls. She's supposed to answer every call by the fourth ring. She's got a number. If it goes to 5, that's not good. And if it goes to 5 consistently, then maybe you need an additional receptionist, or you need a new system or something along those lines. But everybody has a number that they're working towards. If we go to the gym and we work out, we have a number, right? We put weights on a machine and we want a certain weight on it. It's the same thing. Everybody's got to have a number, and you've got to be able to do the repetitions. You got to be able to do the things that you need to do to become better, stronger, and faster. Because it's easy to become slower. It's easier to become weaker. It's easier to have those days where it's just not a good day. But the winners are the ones that go out and get it done. So make sure that we're incentivizing, and incentivize through compensation, the people that are really getting it done.
Thank you. And Rick Phelps has put the names of some great books on the right side in the chat with regard to some ideas to consider in the same area. I do want to switch topics real quick. There was one here that I liked the idea on. It was, does anyone have a successful case study of conflict resolution once a misalignment is recognized between a management team and an equity investment group? I'm going to just toss that one out there. Does anyone have a good case study on that one?
Yeah, Dustin, I threw a couple out there that are you can get through Google Scholar. You'd have to pay for these. I haven't read these, to be perfectly honest, but I just did a quick Google search on them. I think they're like $30 a piece. So if somebody wants to be the guinea pig and cough up the $30, we can regroup. Now, if you've ever read an academic journal, they are not like reading Traction. They are not like reading good to great. They are the driest empirical data studies that you will ever read. So the nice part is they give you an abstract. So you can read the abstract for free and then determine whether or not you want to actually spend the money on the academic article.
Thank you. So yeah, we encourage you to do that. We are also recording this. Everybody who attends today will receive a link to this recording as well as a faculty directory to follow up with people. I love these book ideas. I want to have time to take at least one live question. So if you have a live question, please unmute yourself and just ask a general question for us. There's a couple tax questions I saw on here. I know those are much more complicated. I certainly encourage you to reach out to the folks on this group that are tax related. Same with legal questions. Again, very complicated. No one size fits all. Who has a general question that we can tackle? Please feel free to unmute yourself. All right, then I guess I will ask the question.
Hey, Dustin, if there's no questions, I'd like to comment on that the question about the case study. Obviously, if there's a misalignment between the sort of private equity group and the management team, the first obvious place to look is how that arrangement was set up. Because if done correctly, going into the deal, there should have been an alignment of interest through both the employment agreements and through the through the equity. And so, obviously the money guys behind the deal always have the leg up. The management guys are always kind of reacting to what the money guys want. But it really, I just wanted to speak to the importance of going into a transaction, new money's coming in, and there's either a change of control or a change in dynamics, where now the management team is no longer on their own to make decisions. They're beholden to the private equity guys. That's the time to get that right, is in the beginning. The time to have those discussions about how to align interests and how to sort of exit if there is a misalignment is in the beginning of that transaction. It really illustrates the importance of getting it right on the front end. I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard so many case studies to the opposite, where they're talking about what happens when things go south pretty quickly. So it's nice that we'll see some case studies on things that go well. Who else might have a question? All right, then I'm going to end with this question that I'm actually going to ask of Andy. Andy, as we look at access to capital, whether that is for equity in terms of acquisitions or growth capital. You mentioned it's a busy market for M&A, but what is it going to look like for the people out here in terms of their access to capital for the rest of this year?
Well, I think there's plenty of capital. There's plenty of liquidity, both in the public and private markets, both with debt and equity. I think conditions are good. Dustin, you're right. There's a lot going on, but there's not as much going on in the middle market across most industries. Some industries are an exception, but across most industries that had a COVID impact, many sellers are really looking to get back. They're trying to get back to their 2019 numbers before they do something. And it's really a valuation question. Right now, valuations are great, though. I mean, I think that conditions are good now, and they'll continue to be good. Someone asked a question about inflation this year. Some clients, based on my experience and with specific clients that I'm working with and have worked with over the past year, there's definitely a lot of disruption going on in the Asian supply chain. About probably 7 months ago, container freight rates started to go up. They've continued to go up. There's container shortages. You've got commodity inflation across different metals and resins. If you're talking about consumer products made in China or made in Vietnam and India and other places, I mean, those products are going to start hitting the shelves at a higher price, in the second quarter here and certainly into the third quarter. You've already seen the inflation and what's happened in food, and that was pretty immediate as a lot of food processors, had to shut down temporarily due to COVID last year, and they're still trying to work themselves out of those supply shortages. So that's a little bit of a wild card for the back half of the year. these manufacturers of products overseas are absorbing some of this inflation. The U.S. companies that are supplying into retail are absorbing some of it, and I think the retailers are absorbing some of it as well. If you're fortunate in getting them to take the price increase, but they're never going to take all of it. So I think there is some inflation coming, and how much, to what extent we're talking about, and how that impacts consumer demand. We're all know basic economics. When prices go up, demand is gonna come down a little bit, but how much that really hits the economy at the same time when we're working ourselves out of the COVID high unemployment rate we're still working with, it remains to be seen.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. I'm going to leave everybody with my summation of 5 thoughts that came out of today's out of today's conversation. 1, reevaluate your business. It's a good time to do so. 2nd, think about your people. They're your most critical asset. 3rd, analyze your cash flow and liquidity. Make sure you're going to not only make it through this year, but come out the other side strong and ready to grow. 4th, plan ahead. Don't wait till tomorrow. And finally, be flexible, think differently, and be ready to adapt. I think if we follow those things, which came out of the presentations you heard today, 2021 should be a strong year for all of us. And God willing, we all make it through this COVID and look down the other side and get back together in person as soon as we can. On behalf of TEI, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Again, my name is Dustin Klein with Smart Business, and we hope you have a great rest of the year 2021. We hope to see you at other programs during the course of the year. Bob, anything else you want to add? He's muted. He's saying goodbye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Good weekend.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe. We'll see you next time. Great job, Dustin.
Thanks.